The Wyoming wind did not simply blow, it hunted, slicing across the ridge with the bite of sharpened steel, driving snow sideways until it stung bare skin and burned the eyes. Men had died in storms like this, vanished without a sound, swallowed by white silence. Caleb Harrow stood planted against it all, boots buried deep in the drift, Winchester steady against his shoulder, a lone figure carved out of grit and grief. 3 days he had tracked the Morrison gang through this frozen hell. 3 days of cold hunger and memories he had tried and failed to bury. The land remembered everything, and so did he. Then, through the veil of driving snow, he saw her. Below in the valley, a woman lay half-submerged beside a fallen horse, its body already stiffening in death. Blood spread beneath her in a dark stain, stark against the white like spilled ink. Caleb's breath caught hard in his chest when she lifted her head. It was not the face that stopped him. Her jaw was sharper, her features cut by hardship, her hair darker beneath a torn hat crusted with ice. It was her eyes, storm gray, the exact shade that had haunted his nights for 2 long years, the same eyes he had watched fade as they lowered Eliza into Denver soil. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that impossible detail. He should have turned away. The storm was worsening. And in this territory, mercy was often just another way to die. Nature did not bargain, and neither did men. Yet something inside him cracked, something he had believed frozen solid since the day he lost his wife. The woman dragged herself weakly toward the line of pines, her left leg useless, carving a shallow trail through the snow. Caleb dismounted without thinking, moving downslope with the silent efficiency of a former cavalry scout. His voice came out rough, unused, scraped raw by days without speech. Easy. I'm not here to hurt you. She twisted toward him, breath short and ragged, and her hand clawed inside her coat. A small pistol appeared, shaking but aimed, fear and fury burning bright in her gaze. Stay back. Caleb raised one hand slowly, fingers spread. You're bleeding into the snow. A blizzard's coming. You shoot me, you die anyway. Or you let me help. Your call. Snow thickened between them, the wind howling like a living thing. She studied him with strange intensity, as if measuring him against a ghost. Then her lips trembled. You're him, she whispered. You're Caleb Harrow. His stomach dropped. His name carried weight in these parts, and most of it was steeped in loss and rumor. Who's asking? Lilia Crane, she said, pain threading her voice. Eliza's sister. The words struck like a rifle butt to the ribs. Eliza had mentioned a sister once. A schoolteacher back in Denver, stubborn, proud, convinced the frontier could not break her. What are you doing here? Caleb asked, already knowing he would not like the answer. Her gaze hardened despite the pain. I came to ask why you let my sister die. The old wound tore, open, raw, and bleeding. He had replayed that day 1,000 times, Eliza riding toward Denver, refusing his escort, refusing to let him see how sick she had become. He had begged her to wait. She had already been slipping away long before the outlaws ever crossed her path. Lia tried to rise and collapsed with a cry as her injured ankle buckled beneath her. I heard everything, she gasped. Sarah McKinnon wrote me. Said you knew the Morrison gang was hitting that road. Said you let Eliza go anyway. Caleb closed his eyes. Sarah McKinnon, bitter, cruel, skilled at twisting truth into poison. You listen to Sarah, he said quietly, and you'll die believing lies. Her strength gave out completely. The pistol slipped from her fingers and vanished into the snow. She sagged back, breath shallow, skin already paling from cold. Caleb did not hesitate. He gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than Eliza had been, all sharp lines and stubborn strength. A woman shaped by hard winters and harder truths. I hate you, she whispered. Good, he muttered, lifting her onto his horse. Hate'll keep you warm. But when she leaned against his chest, something shifted in her voice, something beneath the anger, recognition. Caleb knew then, with the certainty of a man stepping toward a cliff, that bringing Lilia Crane into his home would tear open every scar he carried. She was danger to his quiet misery, fire to a frozen heart. Still, the storm was rising, and she would not survive the night alone. He turned his horse toward the cabin, 3 miles through the blizzard, 3 miles toward a past he had never wanted to face again. Lamplight spilled warm and gold when he pushed through the door, the scent of pine smoke and old memories thick in the air. Laya's gaze swept the room, and the way her face tightened cut deeper than any blade. Everything remained exactly as Eliza had left it. The sewing basket by the hearth, the blue dress hanging near the window, the faint trace of lavender that refused to fade. "You still keep her things," Leah whispered. Caleb said nothing. He carried her to Eliza's old chair and knelt to examine her ankle, his hands steady despite the tremor he tried to hide. "You look like her," he said softly, then corrected himself. Different. Stronger, maybe. Leah forced herself to meet his eyes. "Tell me why she died." He wrapped the ankle in silence, then stood, staring into the fire as though the flames held the truth he feared to speak. "She had cancer," he said at last. "Hid it from everyone, even you." The room tilted beneath Leah's feet. "No," she breathed. "She would have told me." "She always told me everything?" "She made me promise not to," Caleb said. "Didn't want anyone to see her weak." Leah's voice cracked. "Why did she go alone?" "Because she wanted to spare me," he whispered. Even at the end, the wind clawed at the windows, but inside the cabin a heavier storm raged. Everything Leah believed collapsed under the weight of truth. And the most frightening part was not the revelation. It was the way Caleb looked at her now, as if she were the first warmth he had felt in years, as if the dead were finally loosening their grip. The blizzard held them for 3 days. Snow climbed the walls, the wind howled without mercy, and Leah sat by the fire with her ankle bound, watching Caleb move through the cabin with quiet intensity. He kept his distance, sleeping on the floor by the hearth as though the cold was safer than the heat between them. On the second night, frost crept along the inside of the windows, and she could not bear it. "You'll freeze," she said. "I'll be fine." "No, you won't. You can take the bed. I'll stay on the edge. We'll keep a pillow between us." He hesitated like a man facing judgment, then finally lay beside her, stiff and careful. The pillow felt like a fragile wall. Her arm brushed his in the dark, and the air shifted. "Tell me about her," she whispered. "Tell me about Eliza." His voice came rough but warm as he spoke of songs and burned biscuits, of clumsy dances and laughter long unused. They talked until embers glowed low, until the space between them shrank without either noticing. By the third morning, the pillow lay forgotten on the floor, and warmth wrapped around them both. When they fixed the shutter later that day, the wind forced him close, his breath brushing her ear. She turned, and their faces hovered inches apart. "This is madness," he murmured. "Yes," she breathed, and neither stepped away. His hand traced her jaw, asking permission he had no right to seek, and she leaned into it. When he kissed her, it was desperate, raw, years of loneliness colliding. He lifted her onto the workbench, hunger shocking them both, until her gaze caught on the small carved jewelry box on the windowsill. Guilt slammed into her. She pushed him away. "We can't." He followed her gaze, pain flashing across his face. "Jesus, what are we doing?" The storm outside was easing, but inside everything felt colder than before. Morning brought hoofbeats, trouble, and with it came the reckoning neither of them could escape. The morning broke sharp and brittle, sunlight glinting off fresh snow as if the land itself had grown teeth overnight. Leah heard the horses before she reached the window, a low thunder of hooves cutting through the quiet like a warning shot. Caleb was already moving, his body going taut in a way that told her this was not surprise but recognition. "Company?" he said, voice low, hand settling near his colt. "What kind?" she whispered, dread blooming cold in her chest. "The kind that brings trouble." She limped to the window and peered out through the frost-scraped glass. Amos Whitaker rode into the clearing like he owned the land, 6 armed men fanning out behind him, their horses steaming, their eyes sharp and curious. Whitaker tipped his hat with a smile that never touched his eyes. "Mrs. Crane," he called, his voice carrying too easily across the snow. "Folks in Red Rock are mighty concerned about your reputation." Heat rushed to Leah's face, shame and fury tangling together. In the frontier, a woman's honor was brittle as thin ice, easily cracked, impossible to mend once broken. Caleb stepped forward, placing himself between her and the men outside, his shadow long on the porch. "You got something to say, Whitaker? Say it to me." Whitaker ignored him, gaze locked on Leah like a hook. "You stayed here 3 nights with a man who ain't your husband. A man with a past darker than winter midnight. That kind of behavior brings shame on a lady." Leia stepped past Caleb before he could stop her. Chin lifting, spine straight despite the pain in her ankle. My reputation is none of your concern. Whitaker's smile widened, thin and mocking. Everything in this valley is my concern, especially when a woman's virtue's in question. Dutch Anders barked a laugh behind him. That cabin ain't big enough for two folks to keep decent. Caleb's voice cracked through the air like an axe blow. Say another word, Dutch, and you'll be picking your teeth out of the snow. Dutch fell silent. Whitaker leaned back in his saddle, enjoying himself. Now, Lilia Crane, folks deserve the truth. And if you won't say it, I will. You've been here alone with Harrow days on end. That makes you compromised. Leia felt something harden inside her. I am not compromised, she said clearly. I'm alive because this man saved me. And if you think you can shame me into helping you steal his land, you're mistaken. Whitaker's face darkened. You need to watch that tongue, girl. No, she replied, steady as iron. You need to watch your step. Pride surged through Caleb, sharp and unexpected. She stood fearless before men who made a living breaking others. Just like Eliza had, Whitaker wasn't finished. Tell me, Harrow, he shouted, loud enough for his men to hear. What kind of man lets his wife die alone? What kind of coward sends her down a road he knew was dangerous? The words struck deep. Leia felt Caleb flinch beside her, saw the way his jaw tightened as if bracing for a blow. Whitaker drew his gun. Caleb moved faster. Leather creaked, steel flashed, and the shot cracked like thunder. Whitaker screamed, clutching his shattered hand as his revolver fell into the snow. Dutch reached for his own weapon, but a second shot buried itself in the porch post inches from his head. Next man draws, Caleb growled, dies on this porch. Silence fell heavy as a grave. Then another voice cut through it. That's enough. A lone rider emerged from the aspens, silver hair catching the light, a badge glinting against his coat. U.S. Marshal James Thompson. Whitaker went pale. Marshal, I didn't know. That's clear, Thompson interrupted, dismounting. If you did, you'd have thought twice before threatening decent people. He inspected Whitaker's wound. Clean shot. Count yourself lucky. Whitaker sputtered, trying to recover. Harrow's a menace, a coward, a danger to women, and a war hero, Thompson cut in calmly. A man who saved half his cavalry unit at Buffalo Creek. You remember that, Harrow? Caleb stiffened. I don't talk about it. Maybe you should, Thompson said. Your name's been dragged through mud long enough. Leia stared at Caleb, stunned. You never told me. Didn't matter, he muttered. It matters to me, she whispered. Thompson swung back into the saddle. Amos Whitaker, you've been stealing land by intimidation for years. That ends today. You've got 24 hours to clear out of this territory. You can't do that, Whitaker snarled. Thompson's eyes were cold. I just did. The men hesitated, then turned their horses, helping Whitaker up. Rage burned in his gaze as he looked back at Caleb and Leia. This ain't over. But when the last rider vanished into the trees, the clearing felt lighter, as if the land itself had exhaled. Inside the cabin, Leia began gathering her things, hands moving on instinct. Caleb watched from the doorway, dread tightening his chest. You're leaving. I have to. After what almost happened? You don't have anywhere to go. I'll find a way. He told himself he could survive this too. He had survived worse. But when she reached for her coat, something slipped from the mantel and fell open on the floor. Eliza's jewelry box. Inside lay a folded letter. Leia froze. I've never seen this. Caleb stepped closer as she unfolded it, Eliza's handwriting unmistakable. My dearest Leia, if you're reading this, then I am gone and you've come looking for answers. Leia read aloud, tears falling as Eliza wrote of hidden pain, of love fierce enough to let go, of forgiveness offered from beyond the grave. Do not blame him. Do not blame yourselves. If love finds you both, let it. My heart is big enough for memory and hope. Caleb could not breathe. At the bottom of the box lay a velvet pouch. He opened it slowly, revealing a sapphire ring. She wanted you to have this, he said hoarsely. Leia covered her mouth, sobbing. Caleb stepped closer, voice shaking. I know I'm older, harder than you deserve. But if you'll have me, yes, she whispered. Before he could finish. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he pulled her into his arms, the kiss that followed felt like sunrise after endless winter. Outside, the snow lay soft and bright. Inside, two broken hearts finally found a way forward. The days that followed did not rush them. They settled instead, slow and careful. like snow easing down from a heavy branch after a storm. The valley changed its tone once Whitaker and his men were gone, as if the land itself had been holding its breath and finally allowed itself to rest. Caleb noticed it first in the quiet. Not the hollow quiet he had lived with for years, but a softer one, threaded with the crackle of firewood and the faint rhythm of another person moving through his space. Laya stayed. She did not announce the decision. She simply unpacked her few belongings and placed them where they fit, as though the cabin had been waiting for her to decide whether it deserved her presence. Caleb watched her from the doorway more than once, struck by how naturally she belonged, how easily she navigated a home built around another woman's memory without trying to erase it. She spoke Eliza's name without flinching. She touched the blue dress once, gently, and then left it hanging, a quiet acknowledgement rather than a challenge. At night, they slept in the same bed, cautious at first, an unspoken agreement to move slowly. The desire between them did not vanish. It simmered, patient and persistent, shaped now by respect and a deeper understanding of the cost of love. Laya's ankle healed under Caleb's careful tending, and with each day she grew stronger, moving with a confidence that reminded him painfully and beautifully of Eliza. Though her laughter was sharper, her fire less restrained. She asked questions about the land, about the cattle, about the scars he carried both on his body and beneath it. He answered honestly, no longer hiding behind silence. He told her about the war when she asked, about Buffalo Creek and the men he lost, about the night he learned what it meant to carry command and consequence. She listened without trying to fix him, and that more than anything, loosened the knots he had lived with for years. When spring threatened the valley at last, pushing green through the white, Laya rode beside him along the fence lines, her posture still careful but her spirit unbroken. The land responded to her as if recognizing one of its own. Caleb saw then that this was not a replacement for what he had lost, but a continuation, a second chapter written with scars intact. The past did not vanish. Eliza remained in the quiet corners of the cabin, in the way Caleb still paused when he passed the sewing basket, in the way Laya sometimes stared into the fire with her sister's eyes. But grief no longer ruled the space between them. It became something shared, understood, and set gently aside when it threatened to consume them. Word traveled fast in the territory, faster than storms, and with it came a slow shift in how Caleb Harrow was spoken of. The marshal's words carried weight, and so did the sight of Laya riding beside him, chin-high, sapphire ring catching the sun. People still whispered, but the venom drained out of it, replaced by curiosity and, in some cases, respect. Caleb did not seek redemption. He simply lived, worked, and loved with a steadiness that spoke louder than any defense. One evening, as dusk stretched long shadows across the valley, Laya stood on the porch beside him, the wind gentle for once. "I didn't come here looking for this," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. She leaned into his shoulder, and for the first time he did not feel the weight of comparison or guilt, only gratitude. She came to Wyoming for revenge, driven by anger and grief sharp enough to cut a man open. Instead, she found the truth, and with it a future neither of them had dared imagine. The night Caleb finally asked, her to stay for good did not arrive with thunder or ceremony, but with a quiet so complete it felt sacred. The fire burned low, throwing slow amber light across the cabin walls, and outside the wind whispered instead of howling, as if the land itself had decided to listen. Laya sat at the table mending a tear in her coat, her fingers steady now, her ankle strong enough that she no longer favored it. Caleb watched her from the hearth, struck again by the strange rightness of the sight, by how the cabin no longer felt, like a shrine to loss, but a living thing drawing breath again. He realized then that fear was the last thing holding him back, not of loving her, but of believing he was allowed to. He crossed the room without speaking and rested his hand over hers, stilling the needle. She looked up, storm-gray eyes soft but unflinching. "If you're going to say something," she murmured, "say it plain." He swallowed the way a man does before stepping into deep water. "I don't want you leaving when spring fully breaks. Not for Denver. Not for anywhere. I want you here, with me. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Because you choose this." She searched his face, reading every line, every hesitation, every truth he could not hide. Then she smiled, small and fierce and certain. I already chose Caleb Harrow. I just needed to know you had too. Relief hit him so hard he had to brace himself against the table. He pulled her into his arms, holding her not like a man clinging to salvation, but like one standing finally on solid ground. When they kissed this time, it was slower, deeper, the kind of kiss built on trust instead of desperation. That night, when they lay together beneath the quilt, there was no pillow between them, no edge carefully guarded. The love they made was unhurried and real, marked by laughter, whispered names, and the quiet reverence of two people who understood loss well enough to cherish what remained. Eliza's presence did not vanish in those moments. It lingered gently, not as accusation, but as blessing, woven into the fabric of the life that continued, because she had loved deeply, enough to let go. Spring arrived in earnest, transforming the valley inch by inch. Snowmelt fed the streams, grass pushed green through the soil, and calves bawled in the distance. Laya learned the rhythms of ranch life quickly, rising before dawn, riding hard despite lingering stiffness, arguing with Caleb over fence lines and laughing when proven wrong. She wrote letters back east, but did not send them right away, savoring the freedom of belonging to herself before explaining it to the world. Caleb found himself planning again, thinking in seasons instead of days, imagining children's laughter echoing where silence once ruled. When Marshall Thompson returned once more, it was not with trouble but with news that Whitaker had been driven out entirely, his grip on the valley finally broken. "Good riddance," Laya said, and meant it with a calm certainty that made Caleb smile. They were married that summer under a sky so wide it felt like a promise. There was no grand church, only the land, a handful of neighbors, and the wind carrying vows spoken steady and sure. Laya wore a simple dress, Eliza's sapphire catching the sun on her finger. Caleb's voice did not falter when he said her name. The past did not vanish that day, but it took its proper place, no longer ruling the present. Years later, when the story of Caleb Harrow was told, it was no longer a tale of tragedy whispered in corners. It became a story of endurance, of love found not by forgetting the dead, but by honoring them enough to keep living. And on cold Wyoming nights, when the wind still cut like a blade across the ridge, a warm cabin glowed in the valley below, filled with life, memory, and the quiet. Certainty that even the harshest land could yield something beautiful to those brave enough to stay.